thank you everybody for coming. This is our last STEM speaker series for the 18-19 academic year. So, of course, we would like to thank our sponsors, LHC Structural Engineers. LHC is a local engineering firm in Raleigh with more than 40 years of experience designing a diverse number of building structures to include hospitals, churches, corporate buildings, and college and university projects. A few of their more notable projects include the Medical Center of East Carolina University, the North Carolina Museum of Art, the North Carolina Museum of History, and the North Carolina Aquariums at Roanoke Island, Fort Fisher, and Pine Knoll Shores. We are grateful for their funding and support, which makes this speaker series possible. So today we have Mike. I'm going to let you pronounce your last name. Perfect. Talking about crop and soil sciences at NC State. Welcome, Mike.
All right. Thank you. If we can have the lights, it might help. Is it? You want to stay on? Okay, that's okay. That's all right. That's all right. Leave them on. All right, what I want to do is talk about NC State today, and particularly a program in the College of Ag and Life Sciences. I'm from the Department of Crop and Soil Science at NC State, and I think when you read that name, you're going to say, that's agriculture, that's farming. But I'm interested, you might say, in environmental science or natural resource management. And I'm here today to convince you that you can still consider us because we do those things too. So don't just think this is a farming department. It's much, much broader than that. And I'll try to show you how broad it is in the next 40 minutes or so. Now in this talk, I'm going to do four things. Give you a brief biography of myself, because every talk is going to be biased, and I want to show you what my biases are up front. Then give you a sales pitch for NC State, which I hope you all consider. Then talk about the majors in my department. And then I'm going to focus on a soil scientist and try to explain what soil scientists do. All right, so what do I know? I am a soil scientist, okay? And I study wetlands in particular. So if you're interested in wetlands, consider our department in the College of Ag and Life Sciences. I do have some agricultural experience, and I can flip back and forth. Why? Because the things that you need to know about wetlands are very similar to things you need to know for farming. So my research, I do research as well as teaching. My research is on how to restore wetlands, so that's clearly environmental. And the classes I teach include wetland soils, climate change and sustainability, as well as soil genesis and classification. So today I'm clearly going to be biased towards the natural resource side of things as well as the environmental science side of things. Okay, let's turn to NC State. Just some pictures here. This is from the central campus. This is our free expression tunnel where you're welcome to take a can of spray paint and put anything you want on the walls. Of course, everybody else is too, and so it may not last that long. This is our student union that's fairly new, and this is our technology tower. Yeah, it does look like a lightning attractor, and it probably does get hit quite several times a year, but it's still standing. Our other famous tower is the Bell Tower, and that's on the east end of campus that you are probably more familiar with. So come to NC State, you should be able to see some of these landmarks. Now, I went to the NC State website to see, to get some facts and figures, and this is stuff I wasn't even aware of myself in some cases. We're fairly large, over 35,000 students, with about 2,200 faculty and 6,500 staff, technicians, bookkeepers, and so on, to help assist us in our work. That means our student to faculty ratio is about 13 to 1. Now, if you do the math, it doesn't come quite to 13 to 1, but I'm assured that it is actually 13 to 1. So fairly small in the sense of being able to give you individual attention when you need it. We've got 10 colleges that represent most of the major academic fields. We do not have a medical school or a law school, things like that, but we cover just about everything else at NC State. We have over 700 student organizations where you can find something to do, meet people. We have even a soil judging team, for example, that goes around the country competing with other schools in the nation on how to evaluate land. I'm told that we're educating more North Carolinians than any other university in North Carolina. Now, I've highlighted university because I know we don't teach as many as the community college system, but for the universities, we're apparently number one. And 20% of our students transfer in. So you don't have to feel that you have to start at NC State. In fact, in my department, I think about half of our undergrad majors, if not more, are transfer students from community colleges. Now, rankings. This was a surprise to me too. According to Money Magazine, we are the #1 best college in North Carolina, and I think this is best for value. Now notice that's for North Carolina. We have the #4 veterinary medicine program, according to U.S. News and World Report. We're #6 in best value among public universities nationally, U.S. News and World Report. And we're #11 in the nation in our undergraduate entrepreneurship program. And this means we've got a bunch of courses, largely in the business school, that are slated to teaching students how to start a business. Okay, so if you're interested in starting a business, come to NC State. Now let's go back to this money survey. It says we were #1 in North Carolina. It's from September of 2018, pretty recent. Now overall, we ranked 31 in their survey of 727 colleges. That's still pretty good. 90% of our students now need some financial assistance and will get grants. And that's about half of all of our students. So half of our students get grants. The price for this year for tuition and fees is about $14,000 after you get your grants. Also, it says after 3 years, the first 3 years after a degree, on average, our students are earning $53,800. Now, this includes things like the School of Engineering. So, some fields are paying more than others, but we're getting pretty good salary. Our students are getting pretty good salaries after they come out. How long does it take to get out? Well, we do graduate 78% of the students who are enrolled. They, according to this survey, average 4.4 years in getting their degree, which is pretty darn good. And the average student debt, on the sad side, is about $20,800, which is still a little bit low. It's less than a new car, for example, but still it could be a potential problem. I want to come back because I forgot to mention, this is for students with need. They would pay $14,000. But according to the survey, if you have even greater than typical needs, this can be reduced to about $6,000 to $7,000. So again, the cost at NC State can be brought down with grants that we offer. These are the colleges at NC State. Some of these you may be familiar with. College of Design, Humanities and Social Services. The big one, NC State Engineering, College of Vet Medicine, College of Natural Resources, College of Science, where you're going to find physics, math, biology, and that sort of thing. The Wilson College of Textiles. Those of you interested in geology would find a home over here. And then mine, which is the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences. Now, if you're interested in environmental science or natural resource management, you would normally gravitate to the College of Natural Resources. But I want to try to convince you today you ought to take a look at our college as well, because we offer similar programs. In fact, we cooperate with this College of Natural Resources on some of our majors. And so if you're interested in environmental work, natural resources work, consider Ag and Life Sciences before you make your decision as to what major you'll join. All right, that's NC State. I hope you feel it's a good place that you want to consider. Now let's talk about my department, Crop and Soil Sciences. What do we do? Well, first of all, we grow food. We train people to grow food, as you might expect, so farming. But we also train people to manage land. And manage land such as wetlands, residential developments, and golf courses. Okay, so we deal with land management in the broad sense, not focusing solely on agriculture, although that is a part of what we do. Now, why should you consider crop and soil sciences? Jobs. According to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, high-skilled jobs in areas covered by our degree in crop and soils will outpace the number of qualified graduates by over 22,000 each year. What that means is you should be able to find a job with one of our majors in any part of the United States, okay? What do we train you in? Again, growing food for world populations. We do have some international programs. If you want organic agriculture, we've got that. I'll talk more about land development, and that will also lead us into water resources and the environment. We will cover all spheres or all elements of this of the spheres in the world. Now here are our undergraduate degrees. You'll be hearing this or seeing this throughout the talk. You can go there and get more information, but I'll try to summarize the basics of our undergraduate degrees for you here. So you can see we start off with agroecology and sustainable food systems. This is basically organic agriculture. We also do have an agronomy major. This is the traditional farming methods basically for growing crops. Biotechnology. We talk about plant breeding or teach about how to breed new plants, and there's job opportunities in that as well. This is mine, soil, water, and land use, which is part of the Natural Resources program at the university. And we also cover turfgrass science. If you ever wanted to manage a golf course or make athletic fields, that's the major for you. Now let me go over some of these in more detail. But before I do, a couple of backgrounds, things that relate to all of them. Now, in all of our majors, you're going to take courses that include basic sciences, chemistry, math, biology, physics, things of that nature. So we are a science-based curriculum. You have to be in order to do the things that we do. We do have a lot of electives that you can choose to take to satisfy your specific interests. Climate change, for example, might be one of the electives. We also ask that our undergrads get some experience in public speaking, writing, economics, statistics, and computer science. You may not have thought about it, but in most professions, you will have to give a talk, or you could give a talk. And having some information, having some experience in speaking publicly would be a big benefit, I think, for you. Writing is also critical. You have to communicate with the written word, and so you've got to have that skill in order to look like an educated person. Now, let's start with the majors. Agroecology and sustainable food systems. Now, this is for those folks that want to learn how to grow food, but do it without chemical inputs. This shows you how to use natural inputs and getting away from fertilizer and pesticides and herbicides to grow crops for eating, all right? So if you're interested in this topic, this major is probably one right up your alley. Now, traditional agronomy. In the old days, this would be for students who wanted to go back to the farm. But we don't have too many four-year majors who actually want to do farming, but they still want to work in the agricultural industry. And that's who might be interested in agronomy. So we give students the scientific background on how to grow plants for food, fiber, cotton for example, and other plant products that are in demand. Hemp is big right now. You're going to be taught not only how to grow crops, but also how to manage a business. Because if you want to make a profit, you've got to know how to manage that business well. And graduates of this program go into the agricultural industry. It could be selling fertilizer and seeds, or actually growing crops if you want to go back into a farming situation. Okay? Next, biotechnology. These are the plant breeders. We are going to need new crops that are adapted to different environments as climates change in the years ahead. So the biotechnology people in the department are trained to breed new crops. What they'll do is work for seed companies. Monsanto, for example, is a big one. And they will develop the seeds that will then be sold to farmers to grow these new crops that are adapted to climate change and other problems. Now, soil, water, and land use. This is mine, basically. It is part of our natural resources curriculum, which is also shared with the College of Natural Resources at NC State. We focus on a little bit different things, though, for our students than they do. Again, we're the same program, just with a different emphasis. Our focus is giving students a solid foundation in resource management, with a focus on soil properties and surface and groundwater hydrology. We manage land, as I'll say again, and in doing that, we have to manage water as well, because what we do on the land affects the quality of our drinking water. Our graduates will basically increase their understanding of Earth systems to help policymakers if they work with the government. But you can also work with private land managers and also private companies that deal with managing soil and water resources. And I'm going to spend more time at the end of the talk going over specific examples of what this means. And lastly, turf grass. If you like to golf, or if you felt you wanted a job building athletic fields or managing athletic fields, this is a major for you to consider. It's $1 billion industry, managing athletic fields, including the golf courses. But it goes beyond golf courses and athletic fields. It includes home and industrial lawns, and I don't just mean cutting the grass, but starting companies to manage home and industrial lawns, as well as turf on golf courses and recreational parks. I'd have to say, of these, the golf course managers are the students going into this major seem to be most interested in becoming a golf course manager. All right, those are the majors. So let's say you entered one of them and came out. What would you be calling yourself? Well, one might be the agronomist if you want to work with agriculture on a farm. You get into sales and management of sales of seeds and fertilizer, pesticides. You can become an athletic turf manager. You can become an environmental scientist, okay, depending upon what agency hires you. We have still a need for cooperative extension agents. They are hired by the state to work with farmers and extend information from NC State to the farmer, as well as get the problems the farmer's having and to people at NC State so we can work on them. Golf course superintendent, hydrologist. Now, we don't specialize in training hydrologists. That's more for the College of Science or another department in our college. But for some jobs with USDA, we will train you so that you would be called a hydrologist. We also have natural resource specialists, nutrient management specialists, again, working with agriculture, the plant breeders, precision ag specialists. If you like flying drones, using satellites, we've got more opportunities there for you because now farmers in particular are using drones and are using satellite data to control their, the amount of fertilizer and seeds and pesticides that they apply to the land. This is all being done with high technology, and there's a need for more people with that training. Real estate developers. We actually work for the real estate industry in soil science. So if you're interested in the development side, we can train you for that as well. Research station managers. That's part of the NC State system. We've got research farms around the state. We can restore wetlands, for example, and we'll train you on how to do that. Seed production agronomists. Once you breed a new seed, you've got to produce a certain amount and sell it to the farmers, and that's what these guys will do. Soil scientists, that's my guy. All right, we go out and evaluate land. You can be a soils consultant, work with a private company doing a soil scientist job. For that, you have to be licensed, and we are a licensed profession in North Carolina. You will have to take 2 exams to get your license and become a licensed soil scientist. We still have a need for soil conservationists going around teaching people how to manage land to avoid too much erosion. Waste. Any product, any waste that's generated basically can be disposed of on land, or at least most of it. And so the courses that we teach will deal with waste management as well, and there's plenty of opportunities for jobs in that. And a wetland scientist, going out identifying the wetlands. It's what I train students to do. But these are just some of the types of jobs that our students will be moving into. Now, everybody's got a need for some money, or at least most of us do. And I want to emphasize that our department in our college has scholarships to give. I mention this now because I don't think we have enough students taking advantage of this. In short, we don't give out all the money we have available. So if you're in need of a little bit of assistance, consider the College of Ag and Life Sciences and my department in particular. Our college gives out more than $1 million in scholarships each year. My department gives out $150,000 in scholarships each year, if we can, okay? In the fall, we expect to give about 45 scholarships to the incoming students, or students that are already there. So again, we do have money to give, and that's one of the big reasons you should consider us if you're interested in environmental science, natural science, or some of these biological things that I've talked about, all right? Okay, so for additional information, just you can contact either of these people. This person is in my department and will direct you to the proper source. You can, if you still don't have any luck, you can contact me. Now, let's go into soil science so I can give you some idea of what we do. Because I think the name is quite misleading. We study land. That's basically all we do, okay? And we study how to manage land properly. We are not preservationists, although we don't want to ruin land. We hope to teach people how to manage land without polluting the environment. That's what we call sustainable ways. We don't want too much sediment going into waterways. We don't want too much fertilizer reaching our groundwater. All of that will be bad. We study the basic processes, and we teach students the basic processes that occur in land, how the bacteria act, how plants grow through soils, what nutrients they need, how water moves through the land into the groundwater, and how that groundwater moves into lakes and streams. All of this is what our students are learning in our classes. And any way that land is managed is a topic that we want to teach, whether it's waste disposal, farming, or wetland restoration. We want to make sure that our students are able to handle a land management problem in any of these areas, okay? Fertility, waste disposal, wetlands, erosion control. And this is a biggie for us right now. So, whose problems do we work on? I don't know how clear this is, but we've got both the rural areas and the urban areas. And we work on problems in both of those areas in my department. So our stakeholders, the people whose problems we want to hear and work on, are the farmers, ag chemical companies, as well as commodity groups, the corn growers, the soybean growers. But you might not realize it, we also work with real estate developers because we have to evaluate, they have to evaluate land they buy to see how many homes or how big a real estate development project can be. We also work with homeowners who are having trouble with their septic system, for example. And basically we work with any industry that has a waste disposal problem because all waste, basically, except for nuclear, can be disposed of on land. Now let's just talk about that in a little bit more detail. We also study water because how you manage land affects the quality of your drinking water. Now in this diagram, I've got a land surface right here. It's a block diagram. I've got a city over, I've got a landfill or a dump over here, adding chemicals into the soil, which go down. There are gasoline storage tanks. There are farms where the farmer's spreading manure. He's plowing and applying pesticides and fertilizer. This is where the pesticides are going. And all these chemicals potentially could go down into the soil and ultimately reach the groundwater, which is this blue stuff right in here. The groundwater with the chemicals then flows to wells, which then pump the water out of the ground and if maybe treat it to some degree. Hopefully they do. But if there are some chemicals they cannot remove, you're going to end up drinking them, particularly in the rural areas where homeowners have wells. So the message here is that bad land management leads to bad water quality. So if you've got a drinking water that's contaminated, it frequently is related to somebody screwing up on land management. Just a couple examples of this again. And these are what our students are trained to handle. This will be a land surface going down to a river. Obviously got a farm with a field of corn. The farmer is putting on nitrogen fertilizer as nitrate, as well as a phosphorus fertilizer. If he applies too much of this, the nitrate will leach through the soil into the groundwater and ultimately reach rivers or lakes. Phosphorus doesn't leach so much, but it runs off with eroded soil. And if that reaches the river, you've enriched the water with phosphorus as well. Now what happens if you've added fertilizer to a river? Well, any plant growing in that river is going to grow to large amounts. We also have problems at homes or with individual home sites in a similar way. If you're in the county or away from a municipal sewer system, you have to dispose of your waste from the sinks and toilets, bathtubs, using a septic system. Now this means the water comes out of the house into a large tank where the solids settle. That water, the liquids then go into a drain field where it's allowed to seep into the land. If that drain field is too small for the size of the house, you are going to be adding a lot of nitrate, drugs that you flush down the toilet, as well as bacteria into the soil. They will reach the groundwater and also end up in your river, if not in your drinking water. So how we manage the land affects the chemicals that end up in our groundwater. Now you might say it seems odd to have a septic system nowadays, but in North Carolina, over half the homes in our state use septic systems to dispose of their waste products. Okay, so this is a big area or a big need for our state. Now what problems then are caused by bad land management? Well, you may not be able to see it clearly, but this is a lake in China covered in algae. Algae is a plant. When you add too much fertilizer and phosphorus and nitrogen, you have excess weed growth, and you can see what the effect of that is. Now when this algae dies and settles to the bottom of the lake or stream, it decomposes, and the bacteria eating the algae then use up all the oxygen, and that also leads to the problem of fish kills. So too much nutrients in the water can lead to fish kills. If you've got a failing septic system, E. coli bacteria are in your drinking water, and this will cause all kinds of problems for you internally. Poor erosion control. We've got a stream coming down with sediment that's filling the water. That has to be removed before you drink it. Probably the most toxic thing of all are pesticides and herbicides. We have to be careful about applying too many of those. And fairly recently, every time you flush excess medicine, unused medicine, down the toilet, it ends up in the groundwater, or can. Okay? And now we're finding that this is another problem that we're going to have to deal with in purifying our water. If you're dealing with municipal water, that can be done at a local water treatment plant. But if you're on your own, on a farm, or in a subdivision, you may be ingesting some of this without knowing it. So the take-home message right now, our soil scientists trained in my department study both land and water. Okay? If you're interested in water quality, consider the College of Ag and Life Sciences. Our faculty study agriculture, environmental, and urban issues, and all are important in our department. The soil processes occurring in land are similar whether the land is used for agriculture or non-agricultural purposes. And I just showed you that with that example of the septic system and the farmer both adding nitrogen to the soil. And lastly, most of our faculty can and have switched from ag to environmental research, depending on funding and the interests of the state. So we are an environmental department as well as an agricultural department in our College of Ag and Natural Resources. Now, with that, let me spend the last few minutes talking about what soil scientists do, because I want to convince you that it's more environmental and not strictly agriculture. I looked at the jobs that our undergrads took over the last 10 years. It's a little bit old data now, but this is the percentage of the graduates and the different industries that they entered. You can see that 35% or so of the graduates moved into a consulting industry job. That means they're working for a local engineering company or a soils consulting company evaluating land or large projects. About the same number entered government work. You could go with the USDA and map soils. You could work with the state to enforce environmental regulations with wetlands or septic systems or a whole host of things. About 20% went to grad school to improve their training. About 10%, actually a little bit less, started their own business or entered a business other than strictly consulting. And just a small amount, only about 5%, actually went back to farming. Okay? So if you ask me where our people are going, from the soil side anyway, it's a consulting type of job. Now, so what does a consulting soil scientist do? Believe it or not, we work for the real estate industry, developing areas of land with houses as well as natural areas that are shown here. So We work for real estate. You might not have thought about it, but that's actually what it is. Now, what do? They evaluate the soils or the property for being good or unsuitable for a septic system. The prices for lots has risen, so we want to know, we don't want to waste land, and we want to get as many homes in a subdivision as we can. The consultants say that housing is the #1 crop in North Carolina. That is, it looks like they're popping up like a cornfield all over the place. But the value of these homes is much more than an agricultural product. So if you're interested, so what we're trying to tell the dean is we are growing houses just as fast as we're growing corn in North Carolina. We also have to delineate the wetlands on this property slated for development. Regulations, both state and federal levels, prevent wetlands from being filled in or drained. And so any development project has to know where the wetlands are. Okay, so we evaluate the land by identifying the wetlands and evaluating the soils for the ability to serve as a good septic system.
So Mike, can I actually interrupt
Yeah.
you here? So it's interesting that actually on the north campus, we actually changed the location of several of the buildings and the shape of the campus because of where the wetlands are and everything.
That's right. Now you could fill in the land and fill in the wetland, but then you've got to replace that filled-in area somewhere else in order to get a permit to do the filling. And that replacement area might be more expensive to create the wetland on than it would be to actually move the building, as in your case. But yeah, it's a big deal. Okay, now, not only do we just evaluate these two things, we then help plan the subdivision by determining the size of the lots and where they actually go in a subdivision. All right, so the first thing we do is we get out there. It's an outdoor activity. Dig a pit and describe the soils on the property. We normally don't have 4 guys doing it like this, but for this photo, that's what we've got. But you've got to be able to describe the soil and then evaluate it or identify any properties that that soil may have for development. Now, this is just a list or some photos of common soil problems in North Carolina. If you live out by the airport, your soils have a tendency to shrink on drying and then swell on wetting. In fact, the cracks that can be forming could be an inch or more thick. This shrinking and swelling moves buildings and causes a lot of cracking. All right, so that's one problem we want to avoid. If you have that kind of a soil, we don't want to put a house on it unless we make some other changes. If you have a wet soil, we also don't want to put a septic system or a house on it. This potentially could be a wetland. If you have a flooded soil, we also don't want to use that for agriculture. And we can identify all that from these studying soils in the pit. And lastly, we don't want shallow soils or where bedrock is too close to the surface. You can't build on that very easily. You certainly can't dispose of waste from a septic system on that. But in most cases in North Carolina, we're going to have good soils that are deep and suitable for development. Now, when you are actually planning the size of the lot, we have to allow for the size of the septic drain field. Not only do you need one drain field, but the laws require you to have an area equivalent, an extra area for a replacement drain field. Okay? And so the size of your land, the individual home lot, is going to be based on the amount of area you need to dispose of the waste generated by this home. And generally, you'll need about 5,000 square feet, if my calculations are correct. All right, so soil scientist goes out and he maps the property, shown here. The green are areas that have the good soils that are not in wetland areas. We know, again, where we can build then. The next step is to estimate the sizes of the lots based on the soils, again, and how much area you need to dispose of your waste. And then within each lot, we find the area that we have to have for the septic system. Okay? Once we know that, we can cite where the house goes as well as the driveway. But the message I'm trying to get at is that where these homes are placed and the number of homes are based on the soil conditions that our guys determined for that land. Okay? So again, we are not an agricultural only type of department. We deal with natural resources, land management, and environmental concerns. Now, are we producing too many soil scientists? And the answer is no, we're not producing enough. And so if you like outdoor work, if you think this kind of activity is of interest to you, consider the Department of Crop and Soil Science at NC State. Now, we will be handing out some things. I've got a card. It looks like this. I'm told that on the back, this is the back, I will have this listed. If you sign up or register at this site, our department will send you more information on our majors. And so I'd encourage all of you to at least do that, to take a closer look to see what we offer. Okay? And with that, I'll take any questions from the audience or from those online, if you can get it to me, about NC State or the programs in my department. Yeah?
How do you determine floodplains?
Basically from the slope of the land. First of all, you are on a river. You've got to have a river or a stream, and it's the flat land next to the river and the stream. Okay, so it's basically got to be flat land. Now, to confirm that, what we can do is auger in and look at the soils. Floodplains have recent deposits, usually of sediment. So the surfaces are going to have very little organic matter in it, or if we dig a pit, you're going to find layers of black, organic, rich soil, then new material coming in. So we can do it by describing the soil, but the main way we focus on is the shape of the land surface. We want that level land with the stream. Yeah?
Why did you say specifically that by the airport the land is the way it is when you were showing a couple slides ago?
The geology of that area is unique.
Is it because it's an airport or because of the land itself?
If you go into it's a unique part of North Carolina. 200 million years ago, the Africa plate began to split off from North America, and it stretched North Carolina. And what happened was you developed some deep cracks all up and down the coast there, and a block from the airport to Chapel Hill dropped down hundreds of feet. It filled in with sediments, okay? And those sediments today are giving us these shrinking and swelling soils that we have. In fact, the land was of so little value, farmers didn't want it. You couldn't put a house on it because you couldn't dispose of your waste easily. And so they decided, let's make Research Triangle Park there. Now, the reason they can do it with Research Triangle Park is that they put in irrigation systems that keep the land either moist or keep the land at a constant moisture level. And once you do that, you don't have the shrinking and the swelling, and the land is not moving up and down, cracking your buildings.
So they have all ponds around that area.
Not so much. The ponds, the ponds could be there for two reasons. One, they needed material to build the roads and all that. And the second reason is you have to have stormwater removal systems put in. But in that soil, it's clayey, and the water doesn't seep in very fast either, and runs off, and so the stormwater removal may be a bigger problem, leading to more ponds as well. If you're interested in that, consider the Department of Bio-Ag and Engineering at NC State.
That's just really interesting how you're talking about how it's cracked like that 200 million years ago, and that's what filled in. That's interesting.
Yeah. Any other questions?
So do you know what percentage of your graduates find jobs within 6 months, 3 months, 6 months?
The ones that I know of, I would say 100%, but we do not have large numbers of majors. I think from the soils side of things, we may only be dealing with 30. And we want all of them to have jobs. So we've got consulting companies that hire them as interns early on, and then when they graduate, they will go to those companies. Okay? But our graduates can go around the country, because what they learn, when you know how to describe a soil, you can work in any state.
So you have interns set up for them to be a lot of
We try, yes. Actually, we've got some companies that are just looking for the good students and set those internships up. We probably could use more students interested in internships, and we could do even more than what we do. But the internships would be with local consulting companies, even down in Wilmington. Also, the USDA hires soil scientists, and those interns can go around the country and get paid.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah. Anything else? But our students, we don't have a lot of graduates. And we have probably more job openings than we have graduates. So it's something you have to consider. Anything else? Yeah.
I'm curious about this, the septic systems that where you dig. Every plot has to have do you dig on every plot to see where that septic system would be?
Yes. Now, you may not always have to dig a pit, but we have other tools that will make smaller holes. But each site would have to be evaluated because they could potentially fail. And each site would have to have a separate permit, basically, okay? And where real estate developers really get upset is when they have spots of unsuitable soil where they can't sell that land. Then it's worthless to them.
What are the most important, as you're a soil science, but what's the most important things about soil that you want, that you like to protect or endorse?
The most important thing is to probably control erosion on your home. When you make a gully, when you let water run over so fast, you're losing land and polluting streams, all right? So we don't want to see erosion. So keep your surfaces covered and you'll be in good shape. The other thing the other thing that you manage would be nutrients. You know, when you drive around Raleigh and you see weeds growing in the front yard, that person's not managing the soil very well. They're not putting on the fertilizer, they're not putting on the lime, they're not controlling the weeds. Okay, so get the soil. We have a lab in our state, actually it's out by the fairgrounds, that's set up just to analyze soil for the nutrients. So you can take a sample of your soil, run it out there, they'll tell you how much fertilizer and lime you got to apply. Most people don't even do that.
Is there a cost for that?
No. In North Carolina, for our citizens, it's free. They charge us at the university, and they may charge some businesses. But now, other tests, like for nematodes, there's a cost. But no, it's free. Yeah.
Question. When it comes to like real estate developers, when they look at a plot of land for like long-term, you know, they're putting a neighborhood on that plot of land, right? Well, how long is the time that they're looking to, you know, make that a sustainable area of land? Like, are these houses, that neighborhood should be there for, you know, 50 years, 100 years, 300 years? You understand my question?
Well, so you mean after it's built, how long do they expect it to be there?
The process of doing research on an area and all of that.
So, Mike, from the online people, they're asking if you will repeat the questions because they hear you because you're mic'd.
Okay. The question is, when a housing development is built, does the developer consider how long it will stay there? And I would say in general, no. But I don't build the house, so I can't say, but I would say no. Now, lifespan of a house is probably going to be around 50 years, let's say. And so if you build it fairly well, you'd expect it to last about 50 years, okay? Now, where that might be an exception and where they should worry about it is on the coast. Because as sea level rises, more land is being carved out off the outer banks and dumped either on the island or in the sound. Pardon?
And the water absorbs into the land as well, more and more all the time, correct?
Yeah, but I mean, it's mainly this erosion, okay? Now, our land is eroding at rates of 5 feet per year. In other words, the ocean is moving landward 5 feet per year on the Outer Banks. If they're building a house 100 feet from the ocean's edge, it's going to last 20 years, okay? And so you got to consider it in that environment. More inland, I don't think it's an issue, and it's probably going to be based on the quality of the materials. But you can look around Raleigh, and homes are lasting 100 years in some cases.
I wonder if that was an important thing when doing that type of research.
And I think not for us. That's a financial decision that the business would deal with. All right? Yeah.
I have another question.
Yeah.
Now, when you put the septic basins on these plots of land,
Yeah.
now if it rains a lot, does that affect how these septic basins fill up and maybe causing issues with homes?
Technically, it should not be a factor if the soil is good. Where that will be a problem is if the soil is too wet to begin with. In other words, if you go down a hill, that groundwater gets closer and closer to the surface. And there'll be some point where it gets so close at some time of the year that the site's unsuitable. It's unsuitable because during heavy rain, the water table, the groundwater is going to come up and inundate that whole septic system. So in other words, if your pores are all full of groundwater, you can't add 350 gallons of wastewater to that soil. It's going to come to the surface, your kids are going to play in it. But we avoid those kinds of soils by trying to avoid having either soils be too wet, which we can identify from the colors, or be too clayey, if you will, where they don't move enough water through them. So in most cases, we won't have a problem. Now, some of these hurricanes are dropping 20 inches of rain on us, or you get that during a week. I don't know what will happen with such a catastrophe like that, but it may fail for a day or two, but I think just in a few days, your land should dry out so that it would function again. I haven't heard of too many cases where the septic systems are failing because of hurricanes or excess water like that, if they're put in the right soils to begin with.
Thank you.
I didn't repeat the question. It was, can septic systems be put in land that where they fail after heavy rains? And the answer is generally no.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time and letting us know.
I enjoyed it. Thanks a lot for inviting me.
Thank you.
Thank you.